Hello and welcome to our webinar on maintaining independence as you age. Thanks for joining us. This is such an important topic. I feel like it's one of those things that people, almost every one of us is going to encounter at some point, but not too many people talk about it, and there's not, I feel like, a whole lot of resources on how to manage that process and maintain as much independence as we can. Because we all want to maintain our independence, but as we age, we inevitably need other people to help us. That's just a fact of life. And kind of how do we do that with maintaining our dignity and maintaining as much control as we can, but also making sure that we're getting the care we need and our wishes are respected. Probably a lot of you know who I am. I'm Shannon McNulty. I'm an estate planning attorney and founder of the Village Law Firm. And I have as our guest today, Amy Jo Neill. She is a daily money manager and founder of the ANA Group. And Amy Jo, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do to help clients?
Yeah, certainly. Hi, and thank you, Shannon, for having me. I agree, this is a really important topic and essentially the basis of how I formed the ANA group. A daily money manager is also called like a household manager or a personal money manager. It's basically we touch all the paper that comes into someone's home. So, or we work with clients to help them manage all the paper that comes into your home. And that can be, your mail, going through your mail, it's doing bill paying, looking at their expenses and income and assets to build a household budget, certainly tracking expenses for taxes or protection against fraud that is so prevalent now with seniors. So it's really helping to manage their household finances and beyond that, any sort of other paperwork that they have to manage as maintaining their home and their independence. So as an extension of that, once I started doing this kind of work for clients, as I became a trusted professional in their lives, some of them would often ask me to be a power of attorney or executor or a trustee for a trust, or a successor power of attorney, so that they may, if they had a partner, they may be naming their partner as their primary power of attorney, but they didn't have someone to serve as a backup. And that's what we do as well now. So that kind of gives you an overview of what we do. I founded this company because this is what I was doing for my mom. And so when I say an ideal daughter, it's like the daughter you always want to have. I mean, I happen to be fortunate enough that I lived with my mom as she aged. So I was right there and, could help see things that were falling through the cracks and kind of pick them up. And I always wondered, what do people do? What do families do? What do individuals do that don't have someone right there next to them, sort of helping them, realizing, oh, they need help with ordering groceries, or they need help with filling out this form, or they need help with paying a bill. So that's kind of where I got the idea for the ANA group.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I think most of us, and especially in New York, I feel like that we don't have lots of family living with us. I mean, we can't even it's hard to just have a one-bedroom apartment, never mind having extra rooms for relatives to come and stay with you. Um, so,
Yeah.
so I think that that's a real concern of so many people. Um, Okay, so I want to cover in this presentation, kind of like how to prepare and as the aging process sets in, because this is not something that's all of a sudden we're really old and we can't do anything. This is something that happens very gradually in most cases, and so how do we kind of prepare for those stages? How to support a loved one who's starting to show signs of decline. So if you have a parent, a grandparent, or just somebody in your life who you have concerns about that they might need some help, what is it that they need, and how to go about helping them? um, how to plan if you don't have family who you can rely on to help you, whether maybe they're they don't live in the area, maybe you don't have a great relationship with them, maybe you don't have any children or people younger than you to help out. Kind of what do you do in those situations? And then I think all of us have this, even if we do have family, like how do we avoid becoming a burden on our loved ones, and what can we do to minimize that? Even if we need help, like how can we make that as easy as possible for them? Okay, and I think one of the big underlying themes here is we want to think ahead, because by the time you need help, it's often too late to put some of these things in place. You might not have the presence of mind to be making those important decisions and making those kinds of arrangements. So you want to do it while you have a whole complete presence of mind. And often, this is going to happen as we get a lot older, but sometimes these things happen even when we're younger and somebody gets into an accident or something, and they lose some of their competencies. So we even want to make sure that we have some of the protections in place, even if we're still young and healthy. So in terms of like thinking about the aging process and how we're going to need help, Amy Jo, can you kind of tell us how it
Yeah.
kind of go
Yeah.
through and think about?
Right. So um, I think even if you don't have a specific um, place in mind of like, oh, I know I'm going to stay in my apartment forever, or I know I want to move into this community, and you don't have a specific, and you have like a specific thing, and it's all laid out for you. But many people don't know or aren't clear about that, but they might have an idea of what's important to them. So they might say, well, you know, I I don't know where I want to live, but I know I want to have good friends around me, or I want to have peers around me. Let's say I was a professor my whole life, and you want to have people that you can talk to about things that are important to you. Or you might, if you're in the city, I have clients that were lifelong members of Carnegie Hall, and that was extremely important to them. So they knew they wanted to be close to Carnegie Hall so they could go and continue to see concerts as long as possible. So you might not have, um, again, a completely specific idea of what you want, but maybe you have um, a sense of what you really care about, and that's, I think, important. Do you like to travel, or is that not important? Maybe you like to garden, or maybe you've gardened your whole life, but maybe physically you're not able to do that, but you love to sit in a lush surrounding, and so you want to find a place, either an apartment or a community or something like that, where that's important. Or maybe you've been a lifelong member of a church, and you want to be uh, continue to be a member of that church, and that's the most important thing. So those are sort of the ideas of like what I think is helpful for people to think about. And then secondly, write some of those things down, And when you're clear about it, and share it with people. It doesn't, you could share it with friends or family, but you could also share it with your financial advisor. Say, this is what I think I want. Do I have, help me make sure I have enough money to support that? Or let's come up with an ideas, options for how I might afford that. And the same, to talking to your estate attorney. These are the things that are important. I think, you're going to talk about in a little bit about how maybe you can use a trust, a revocable trust to put in some of those things that might be important to you.
Okay, great. And this, just sort of a put here some of the stages of aging. Like I said, it doesn't happen all at once. So, kind of what does that look like? So, the first stage is we're completely self-sufficient. This is the time you want to make that life plan. You want to create your legal documents, even if there's nothing wrong with you at all. Sort of the first stage would be, or the next stage would be, if you have some mild impairment, either physical or cognitive. Maybe you need help with stairs. Maybe you start forgetting things. At this point, you may need some accommodations. So for like, maybe you need to live in an elevator building where there's not stairs anymore. Or some kind of, if you have a home that has stairs, maybe you need one of those chair lifts that take you up and down.
Right.
And then you also, this is a time where you also want to make sure that you have friends or professionals who are involved in your life on a regular basis who can spot if there are things starting to fall through the cracks, and ask them, just make sure you check in on me every couple of days and see how I'm doing. And if you do feel like I'm starting to need help, then like let me know, and let's kind of put in some of the support structures that are needed.
I think just to interrupt for a second, I think one of the things that I see when I go to clients' homes and in talking to clients, and you can have you can start to see, oh, you're becoming a little more forgetful. And one of the very important areas that you want to be diligent about is your medications. I'm not a geriatric care manager, and we'll talk about what they do, but if you're noticing that you're forgetting to take medications, or you can't remember if you took it this morning but didn't, there, there are systems out there to help you manage your medications, because it's a common problem. It's a very common problem.
Yeah, and this is where as well, like a lot of professionals who, if you've worked with over the years, like a financial advisor, your attorney, accountant, if they may start noticing things before other people will, because they've seen you sort of on a horizon of time, a linear progression of kind of, they have a reference point of, how quick you were before, and maybe things are starting to, you're a little bit slower now. So you want to be attuned and make sure, tell them like, if you feel like I need help or that I'm starting to miss things, let me know so that we can kind of think about if there's supports that we need to put in place. The next step is dependence. This is where you can no longer live alone. You may need home health aides to come in to help you. You may need assisted living. You also, at this point, probably need help with the finances in terms of somebody managing your day-to-day expenses, getting your groceries, all of those things. Amy, do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, so I think um, often we'll get a call from a client that says, oh, I'm managing everything, but I'm just overwhelmed with the paperwork that comes in to do my taxes. And so, they may be fine paying their bills, or maybe they've put most things on auto pay. And and that's been working well for them because then they're insured not to miss a payment and get slapped with a late fee. But the taxes could be confusing, and they're not sure, what documents they need, or they misplace them. And so oftentimes we're called in initially just to help with the taxes, and then it can kind of build from there.
Okay, great. And that's where it's really nice to have somebody like Amy Jo. What if it's not, a company like hers, it can be a friend or a family member, but this is kind of the progression that somebody is going to see in terms of like maybe they need help with their taxes, and then they need help with the groceries, and then, sort of
Yeah.
as increasing help. And then the final is sort of your severe health needs. You're in our nursing home and hospice. There's a lot of health issues that is kind of very quickly declining.
I think one of the things, Shannon, you had mentioned to me too, is that, that progression that you were talking about in the last slide, that can be over a long period of time. It's not like, oh, this is all, once you start with a little memory issue, it's all downhill from there. No, it can take a good 20 years, what I mean, or longer. So,
Usually does. It usually isn't
yeah,
all of a sudden
yeah,
you to full-time care.
yeah,
So yeah, I think, and even that last part in terms of the kind of a nursing home or a lot of medical care, even that part can take a long time, and a
yeah.
lot of resources, and that's sort of another discussion, that if making sure that you have enough financial resources to cover that, either through your own funds or through Medicaid planning, making sure that that's in place. And that would be a whole other discussion, but we do have
Yeah.
other webinars on that topic, and we have one coming up. Okay, so important documents, and this is something you want to definitely have in place in that first or second stage, where you have peace, presence of mind to be thinking about these issues, making important decisions about who you want to leave your assets to, and very importantly, who you trust to make important decisions for you. So that involves your healthcare decisions. That's done through a healthcare proxy. And we usually include in the healthcare proxy provisions for, we call it maybe a living will, of what are your preferences for, you want to stay on life support indefinitely, you definitely don't want that, you do not want to be resuscitated, those kinds of things. Those are things that you want to include in your healthcare proxy. And it's also something that you want to discuss with whoever it is you choose to serve in that role, because just as important as that document is sort of what is your sense, or what are your general values and principles, and making sure that they understand those so that they can make an informed decision at that time. I think one of the challenging things is that when we do the healthcare proxy, and we're filling out all of these things, you don't know what the condition is going to be. And so you're making these decisions really almost in a vacuum, especially if you're younger, you don't have too many health insurance or health issues, then you have no idea exactly what that's going to be. And so we want to make sure that your agent just generally has the background of what are your values and what are your thoughts about staying on life support. Okay, other things. Somebody managing your finances for you, somebody to sign legal documents for you. We do this with a power of attorney, is kind of a basic document that we use for this purpose. And but I would also recommend a revocable living trust. This allows someone a little more flexibility in terms of providing guidance on how that money is used, if it can be used for home care, when it can be used for home care, putting guidelines in place. The power of attorney is it's kind of like a blunt instrument. It's actually a form document that is created by the state, and you can't vary too much from that form, or it might not be valid or might not be accepted. So the revocable living trust has a lot more flexibility in that sense. So your revocable living trust, like while you're alive and well, you're the trustee of your own revocable living trust. You manage your own finances, but you can appoint a successor trustee to manage those assets when you're not able to. And often this is a good idea, even just to appoint a co-trustee. And that way, kind of as you can still manage things, but as you are not able to, somebody can kind of seamlessly step in to start managing those things for you. And in a trust, we can impose requirements before, for example, funds are used for care outside of the home. So before you're removed from your home, you want to make sure you want to have a report by a geriatric care manager that there is no feasible way for you to stay in your home. Or you want to have maybe 2 out of 3 of your kids or some friends or family or whatever, particular people who you've designated to vote on whether you are able to stay in your home or not. So it provides some kinds of protections that otherwise might not be there. And you can also, in your revocable living trust, require regular evaluations or reports by a care manager to make sure that all of your needs are being met. And this can not only protect you, but also help your trustee to understand what your situation is and what the needs are and what the financial requirements are that they need to take care of.
I know, Shannon, with a power of attorney. So when I've served as a power of attorney, sometimes the client will appoint a monitor, and that monitor doesn't have the full authority of the power of attorney, but they have the authority to request regular reports, check-ins, to oversee what the POA is doing. And I welcome that because I clearly want, we obviously pride ourselves on doing the ethical thing, but also we don't want to sort of be ever accused of sort of doing something, that isn't in line with what you know, their wishes. So to have a check and balance is always a good thing. I don't know if there's a similar thing with a trust.
Yeah, a trust is really flexible, so you can put in there that certain people need to get a trust accounting on a regular basis who was not the trustee. So it has a lot of
Yeah.
flexibility. But
So I think that gives comfort to people when they're, essentially signing, giving power to an individual, whoever it is.
it is a lot of power. And that's why in the power of attorney, people often they don't want to impose that burden on the person who they've chosen. They say, oh, well, I trust this person. I always recommend appointing a monitor because you just don't ever know. Somebody could be in a really get into a really bad situation themselves, and it's just too tempting to
Yeah.
use. And if there's something going off the rails, nobody can do anything about it unless they go to court if they don't have access to the documentation of the transactions that are done. And so
Yeah.
really be if it kind of falls into the wrong hands, and we've seen it, it definitely is something that happens not more often than you would maybe think or hope. Okay, so this is identifying the people in your life plan. Amy Jo, you want to talk about some of the people who should be involved when you're coming up with your life plan or
Yeah. So these are all sort of people or professionals that are involved in, someone's life. These are people that you normally have in your life when you're independent, and then as you age you may need more supports. So certainly family and friends. If you're in Manhattan, often it's your neighbor on the floor. next to you, and that's great. Or your doorman, not that they're going to be your emergency contact, but I had a case recently where we we were called, were serving as a power of attorney, but we hadn't really needed to do anything and yet, and we got a frantic call from a friend because she hadn't heard from her friend in a couple weeks, and we were able to track the individual down on, through the doorman of the building. So doormen are really important people in Manhattan and the city. Um, but also, right, you have to have an estate planning attorney, and sometimes you mentioned the Medicaid planning that may require an elder care attorney to do that long, sort of to look ahead. Um, if they need to do a Medicaid application, either for community Medicaid, where you get services in the home, or traditional nursing home Medicaid. Uh, the we you know we often serve as power of attorney or trustee, but we also work with clients that have family or friends that are a power of attorney. Sometimes we're co-power of attorney or co-trustee, and we work together, or we do the work, but they can oversee it. So we work closely with financial advisors and accountants, especially when a client has sort of a new medical, they may have new medical expenses. Maybe they had a fall and then went into rehab, and all of a sudden they're requiring 12-hour or 24-hour in-home care. That's a huge medical expense that they hadn't had before. And so we put together sort of a projection of what their finances were before and what we anticipate them going forward. And we need to bring the team together. We need to bring the financial advisor, the accountant, maybe the attorney as well, to look at, how long will their finances last? And is this sustainable? Can they continue to private pay, or do we need to look at other options? So that's something that we as a daily money manager or power of attorney really help clients do. Then, we touched on the healthcare proxy, but the geriatric care manager. So as much as we as daily money managers look at the paperwork and the finances and the money, a geriatric care manager looks at the medical. So they handle doctor's appointments and overseeing the medications, and making sure that the doctors are talking to each other, and maybe, oh, good, perfect timing, making sure that if there are home health aides in the home, helping source them. Are you going to hire privately? Are you going to go through an agency? All of those decisions, and who that you find as home care aides, are they trained sufficiently? How are you going to pay them? All of that's really important.
Yeah, and I never knew that this job existed. I'd seen, two of my grandparents go through the aging process. I'd never heard of this until I started doing this type of work, but they really, it's such a great service for families who are dealing with these issues, that somebody can come in who sees these things every day and do an assessment. They can do a full assessment of what this person's needs are and how to coordinate it. And they can actually do a lot of this coordinating of medication, making sure the medication is taken, making sure that the home health aides are coming in, or what level
And
of.
that they're right, and that they're trained sufficiently, because sometimes you're dealing with someone who has dementia, and that's a whole other set of specialties, and training that you want them to have.
So,
I think also one of the most important things that a care manager can do, because I work very closely with them on many of our clients, is they serve as an advocate when someone goes into a hospital. So they have because often their background is a social worker or a nurse. That's often the care manager's background. So they know how hospitals work. They are familiar with rehabs. So if a hospital is offering, if you're going to rehab in a subacute rehab, they're familiar with all of them. They can advocate for you. They can get on the phones with the doctors and discuss, what the blood levels mean and the labs mean, and to have that expertise um, is really, really important when especially if you're aging independently.
Yeah, it's invaluable really in terms of having that advocate, and especially also if whether you have health aides coming in, making sure that they're actually doing their job, and or if you're
Yes.
in a communal facility living arrangement, to make sure that you're getting the care that you need,
Yeah.
because that
Hundred, yeah, 100%.
that those can be really scary situations. Okay, and then Amy Jo, you kind of talked us through as we've gone through this presentation of what you do, but if you want to kind of just give us an overview of what that role does.
Yeah. So I think, oftentimes we're called in, as I said, about taxes, or maybe the mail is piling up, or, you know, maybe they notice that, oh, there's all of a sudden there's late fees on the credit cards. It could be a family member that's noticing that. And maybe said, someone just needs to come in every other week to help mom, go through the bills. Or it could be a situation where, it's a married couple and one of them is now in assisted living, and that individual was in charge of all the finances. So then the individual, the person that's still in the home is trying to all of a sudden, you know, figure out how to manage all the household bills and taxes and forms and everything that they never had to do in the whole history of their marriage or partnership. So those are often times where we're called on to help. And we come in, the first thing we do is just listen. We listen to what the concerns are, where's the anxiety, what are the things that they notice themselves they need help with. And then it's it's very important we meet them in their home, and we just look around. We see, oh, is there piles of mail piled up, unopened mail. Sometimes we even, look in the refrigerator and see, is there food there? If there's no food, how are they managing? Where are their medications? I mean, we're not a care manager, and we don't purport to be, but we might recommend that they have a care manager if we see something that is amiss or concerning. So we try and identify what the problems are, and work from there. We don't come in and take over. We just work with the client to understand and what the problems are. Um, but oftentimes, we look at the bills. If we can sit together and open mail, we can take a look at the bills. It has the credit card bill been paid? What's on the credit card bill? Are there sometimes, we look at the cell phone bill and we see that they're paying for three cell phone numbers and they only have one, and then the other two, haven't been used in a year. So we start to say, oh, well, why don't we give them a call and cancel, those lines if you're no longer using them. Um, that's kind of this just the initial sort of simple start. Building from there, we look at we look at the bigger picture. So we do an intake, we gather information. One of the one of the really important pieces of information is what are their benefits. I work with a lot of retired teachers and retired New York City employees. Some of them have incredible benefits, and they may not even be aware of the full amount of their benefits. They may have a long-term care policy that they've been paying for forever, but didn't realize, maybe they're entitled now to have it activated, and we help them. We can work with them on the paperwork to get that activated, so they're actually getting the benefits that they've been paying for all along. There's also other healthcare benefits. Sometimes people are not aware that they might be entitled to reimbursements from a pension for home health aides. It may not cover everything, but if it covers a certain amount, that can go a long way. And then along with that, part and parcel is protecting against fraud. If there are charges on a credit card that they don't recognize, we call with them and find out what this charge is for and how long has it been going back. We can download their activity into a Quicken profile, like a financial software, and look at what the history has been. One of my first clients, I noticed that the transactions from his checking account weren't reconciling with the check register. So it was when people still filled out check registers. They don't do that very much anymore, but it wasn't reconciling. He was writing checks for $100 to a home health aide, private aide that he, hired. And she was writing over what he wrote and putting in a different number. So instead of 100, she was putting in 400, and she was cashing those checks, and the bank didn't stop it. So that was like one of the first things we found right away, just by looking at his checkbook.
And I think that fraud and identity theft and stuff it's actually way worse now in terms of a lot of online things, and I've just seen it. I mean, I think every one of us has probably been targeted.
Yes.
But as people are older, they may not be able to decipher as quickly that this is a fraudulent kind of scheme.
Yes.
I think we talked about kind of serving as the advocate, building a strategic plan, serving as the power of attorney, and then finally avoiding guardianship. And Amy Jo, do you want to tell us what guardianship is? Because I think a lot of people don't know what that is and why it's so important to avoid that.
Sure, but please feel free to step in if you so I've served as guardian, and it was in a case where there's the individual had dementia, and she actually had a power of attorney, but it was being challenged by someone had stepped in and changed it, and she actually didn't have capacity to change it, and they got into this legal fight. It went to court about who was entitled to be her guardian, and the court required that she have a psychiatric assessment, and she was deemed to have dementia, and therefore they mandated that she be appointed a guardian. So my understanding of guardianship, my experience with guardianship, is when you either don't have a power of attorney, or you're at the point where you are unable, the court deems, or a lawyer deems, that you're unable to create a power of attorney for yourself. And then when you need someone to help with your finances, or help with your healthcare decisions, because it's not only a power of attorney, but it's a healthcare proxy. If you don't have a healthcare proxy, then the court can step in and appoint a guardian.
Yeah, and this is why The power of attorney especially is so, so important, because even if you're married, your spouse does not have the ability, the legal authority to access your accounts that aren't in a joint name. They don't have the ability to sign legal documents for you, enter into contracts. So if you are incapacitated and somebody does need to access those things, then they have to petition the court for a guardianship. And this basically what is a drawn out, expensive, very burdensome.
Very expensive. And sometimes the court will appoint, I mean, in a case where someone's married, I think most likely they'll be able to appoint the your spouse a guardian. But if you're not married, the court may appoint, some stranger, some attorney, from that you're totally unfamiliar with you and your situation. And it's
It
very expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive, and also, unfortunately, we've seen, and there's been a lot of reporting on this actually, of guardians who were negligent, or guardians who, there was a whole movie on it. It's called I
Yeah,
Care. So,
I know,
where
I saw it. Yeah.
there was this guardian, it's actually, there are some truth to some of those things that they referenced, of these companies kind of preying on older people and coming in and basically taking over, asking the court to appoint them because saying that they're incapacitated. And once they're appointed guardian, they have full access to everything and they have full control. They can stop paying your mortgage and say you need to go into a nursing home, and maybe they're getting kickbacks from that nursing home. It can be very, very bad.
Yeah.
So I definitely avoid that as much as you possibly can. Definitely the power of attorney is the number one thing you need to have in place. But also just kind of knowing the revocable trust actually can also be really helpful for that, because if the funds are in the revocable trust, they're not available to the guardian. And so that's another way that you can kind of protect against that. And even some of these cases, there were family members and they came to visit their parents, and the parents were gone. They had been moved out of their house. So
Horrible. Yeah.
it's really, I mean, unless you have somebody there every day,
Yeah.
it can easily happen, or somebody comes in and asks you to sign something, and they may misrepresent themselves and you sign
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah. I think the other thing about power of attorney too is if you may still have capacity, but perhaps, the person who's serving as power of attorney um, ha has developed dementia or Alzheimer's and then is unable to serve, and you didn't have a successor, and you might not have realized it, or might not have realized you needed to update it. So if there's a big medical event in your life or the life of people close to you that you have appointed, that's a good time to review your documents, call your attorney and review your documents.
yeah, and this is as well where the revocable living trust can be more helpful. The power of attorney, if the person's not designated, if their name is not written on there, they can't serve as power of attorney. But in a trust, somebody else can appoint somebody as a trustee. So if your person, there could be many successor trustees. There can, if
Mm,
somebody can't serve, they can appoint somebody else to serve. They can have a
yeah.
co-trustee. This is way more flexible than the power of attorney. Okay, and then finally, I just want to mention that in any of these cases, whether you have professional help, whether, especially actually if you're relying on friends or family, making sure that you have information that's going to be needed. And we go over this with really all of our clients, no matter what ages they are, because if there's an emergency and somebody doesn't know where your assets are, they don't know where, if you had a will, if you know where it is. Some of these things, it's like even if you had a great plan, if nobody can find anything, then it kind of goes out the window. So those are just some of the things that you want to make sure people have access to, some kind of procedure or some system in place to make sure that if something did happen to you, that somebody would know what are your medical conditions, your health insurance card, medications, allergies, all of these things that you carry around with you in your head, But if somebody else had to step in, even if they're very close to you, they may not know a lot of these things.
Yeah. So when we start working with people, this is a similar list to what we start to compile with them, so that we have it on record and we can access it and use it to help. Because you never know, as you said, you never know when you're going to need something like, one of these things. Really important.
Okay, I'm going to finish up. And if we have any questions, so feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. We already have a question, actually. What are the approximate costs of these professionals, daily money manager, geriatric care manager? Amy Jo, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I know that I've, I think there's a range. I think most care managers and daily money managers charge on an hourly basis. And uh, I've seen anywhere from, I guess, about 175 to 225 or even 250 for a care manager, maybe. Um, it depends. Our rates are a little bit higher, like in the 225 range for if we're serving as a power of attorney versus just serving as a daily money manager. But we always charge in increments of tenths of an hour, similar to I think a lawyer. So, if we're doing a phone call and it's a 5-minute phone call, you're going to be charged for 1/10 of an hour, not a big chunk of time.
Sorry, I muted myself
Oh,
because there is construction being done on the apartment next to me.
oh, okay.
When is like when do you feel like it makes sense in terms of people's finances? Like, does it only make sense if they have more than, I don't know, $5 million, or when, what is sort of the threshold where you feel like it makes sense financially?
Well, there's there's a difference between having a lot of savings, like assets, versus having a steady income. So I have clients that may have, fairly small assets, but they might have been a retired teacher or have had a great pension. And so they have a very steady income that's not going to run out. And so it can be very affordable. Honestly, I have a couple clients that are on community Medicaid that I was referred by the attorney to help them do all the paperwork for community Medicaid. And then they, so they don't have a lot of assets, but they may have, between 2 and 5,000 a month, maybe, of income. And that is enough because once you're on community Medicaid, then generally speaking, are not paying for your home health care. So then you can afford, a few $100s a month to have someone help you with your bills.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that can be like it's like an allowable expense. So the money it won't disqualify you for Medicaid if you're spending it on that. Okay, any other questions anyone has? Okay, I think that's it. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Amy Jo. This has been great. And if you have any follow-up questions, or if either of us can be helpful, feel free to reach out. Our contact information is there, and we'll also be
Yeah.
sending each of you a video with the replay in case there's something that you missed.
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump on a call with anybody who has more questions about, me or daily money management or what we do.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye.